G'day everyone and welcome to Flock, a New Orleans Pelicans podcast hosted by me, Lyle Swithenbank, at Lyle Swithenbank on X and YouTube and TikTok and all of the different places you can find us these days. It's changed a little bit throughout the journey. I'm joined by the fantastic David Grubb. He's at the Bird Rights, he's at Heart in the Paint, he's at Boot Crew Media, he's everywhere, and he is one of our Pels experts, and I mean, I don't say that lightly. He has been all over it for many, many years. David, welcome to the show. How are you, mate?
It's great to talk to you again. It's been a little while, but it's always a pleasure to talk with you and share our passion for basketball.
I think that you've hit the nail on the head with that. You know, it's a passion for basketball. That's why we do all of this. This is why we sit and spend our evenings and mornings and afternoons talking about, you know, for me, a team on the other side of the world, but also a professional sports team. And I suppose, let's go right back. Where did your fandom of the New Orleans Pelicans start?
It really picked up for me when Chris Paul got to New Orleans because, you know, I went to Wake Forest. So Chris coming from Wake Forest and that year and that draft, you know, I remember talking, you know, I was not a person who called into sports radio. It just wasn't my thing. I like to listen to it. You know, I was a big fan of just listening. And I remember Jerry Valancourt, though, was the host of a talk show in New Orleans at the time. And the big debate was obviously between Darren Williams and Chris Paul. And being somebody who had watched Chris for those 2 years while he was at Wake Forest, I just, you know, I loved his game. I thought he was going to be the best point guard, you know, for a very long time that we were going to see. And certainly his arrival. I mean, I was a fan of guys like Baron Davis. I had seen Jamal Mashburn play in college. I was in New Orleans when he played in the Final Four against Michigan, and I remember getting to see him walk down the street. So, you know, certainly having a passion for basketball goes back very, very far in my life. But I think it changed because that team that moved in from Charlotte wasn't New Orleans' team. That was Charlotte's team. Yeah. But Chris Paul, I think, you know, even with everything that happened with the Hurricane right after that, he was really that player that cemented the Hornets at the time as New Orleans basketball team. And I think that was the shift for me.
Oh, right. Yeah, it's interesting. That I think the Chris Paul sort of draft and you know, bringing him to New Orleans, I think that's exactly the turning point, I think, where it became New Orleans team from Charlotte, you know, and of course, you know, then you have the Hurricane and everything that came from that. And yeah, I think that really is the shift, right? And I haven't really thought of it like that, but I think that is probably the point where you've just got your brand new point guard. He then becomes this, you know, phenomenal superstar. But what a time! Well, thanks for giving us a little bit of background into how you've sort of come along the journey. Now, fast forward to now, this New Orleans Pelicans team is at a bit of a crossroads, I'll say. You know, change of management. Joe Dumas comes in, he's old school, you know, wants to play tough, wants these guys that want to really buy in and, you know, rah-rah type leader. How have you thought his first, 4 or 5 months gone as the head of New Orleans?
I think the most important thing for Joe coming in contrast to David Griffin, was he had to give what the culture was going to be. And I think that there was some pushback at the end of the Griffin tenure because I think people bought in at the beginning. I think people believed when Griffin said he wanted to create a familial atmosphere and players that wanted to play for each other and all those things. And people, okay, they bought it. It didn't work, you know, and we don't have to rehash all the reasons that it didn't, but it didn't work. So when you come in, people wanted something different. They wanted what they saw, I think, was an atmosphere that was a little too casual, where it didn't seem like there was enough order and structure for what a successful organization, a successful basketball team should have. And so for Joe's approach, I think the biggest word is the appearance of accountability. You saw the changeover in the front office staff, people who had been here a long time and had had individual successes. Swin Cash had individual successes in that front office. Bryson Graham had individual successes in that front office, things that he did very, very well. But Joe Dumars wanted to show that this was a new day and that there was going to be a new standard being set. We will see what the outcome is. But I think the impression that fans, and I think that the people around the front office now, and you've heard reports of people kind of walking around on eggshells because they're understanding it's a new day and you need to prove something to the new guy. And this isn't new in business or in society. You do have to prove something when somebody new comes in. And Joe is setting a tone that he's new. And the things that maybe you got away with before, whether you're Zion Williamson, whether you're the janitor at the building, whether you're Willie Green, it doesn't matter. There's a new person to evaluate those things. And his standard is not in any way related to anything other than winning basketball games. And he would love to have good people. He'd love to have kind people and all those things. But his job is to win basketball games. And I think that he's put that at the forefront of anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like you said, the reports, people walking on eggshells, well, that just means that he's come in and made people uncomfortable, right? It's like, hang on, this is the level that I expect you to be at, and if you can't meet it, that's fine. And like you said on the Saints broadcast recently, if you don't want to be here, then you can go. And, you know, perhaps I'm phrasing a bit blunter than, you know, he'd said it, but that's the mentality, right? It's get on board, and if you're not, that's fine. If you can't meet the standard that we want to set, then that's fine. Like, you can go. Like, there's not an issue with that. And it wasn't a personal thing. I think if maybe under the previous regime, if there had been a comment like that, there may have been undertones of perhaps more personal type digs rather than, you know, just this is the bar that I've come in with. You know, I'm happy for you to reach it. I'd love for you to reach it. If you can't, that's fine as well. But, you know, maybe somewhere else is the place for you. And that sort of drags me to, you know, Zion Williamson. Yeah, I think he's always pretty high up the totem pole in terms of things to talk about. Joe's saying that he's bought in. You get an ESPN report today that's like, oh, you know, he was ranked as the most likely to be requesting a trade, and you're like, well, that completely contradicts everything we've been told. Is he in? Is he out? What are your thoughts to simplify the thing?
I think Zion is in. I think what Zion has been looking for is what Joe is trying to provide now. I think Zion wanted an understanding of what the structure was going to be. I think Zion wanted to be centered as the franchise player. And I don't think that happened in the first 6 years of his career. It was never his franchise. And so I think that the things that he wants, Zion does not particularly enjoy the spotlight. That do you have any sense that Zion enjoys people being in his personal affairs, no matter what level? You know, certainly he's had his missteps with some personal relationships, but anything, it is rare to have a Zion Williamson sighting. You've seen Trey Murphy outside. You've seen Herb Jones outside. You've seen Jose Alvarado. You never see Zion Williamson. And I think Zion prefers the anonymity that a town like New Orleans gives you. People in New Orleans don't bother celebrities. That's why we have people from all over the world. We've had major celebrities own homes in the city, and you'd never know that they did because people just don't bother people here. And so I think that Zion enjoys that he's not a person you saw in his collegiate career, that when he was at Duke, every time you did an interview with Zion, you had to talk to R.J. Barrett. You had to talk to these other guys too. He wasn't going up there by himself. And so I think Zion is absolutely bought in. When you tell him, this is your team now, here's exactly what we expect of you, and we will not budge on these things. And he still has the two guys that he's played best with to this point in his career. He's got Trey Murphy. He's got Herb Jones. Why would he want to leave those guys who he has a great relationship with that accentuate what he does well? He still has his own team. He's still getting paid the maximum he can be paid at his age and these many years in his contract and his experience in the NBA. He has a team that still wants to build around him. Where is that situation going to exist if he's traded or if he's not bought in? Wherever he goes next will be someone else's team. It will be someone else's organization. And they will have a shorter leash with him than the Pelicans have because they will view him as damaged goods in one way or another. I think Zion fully wants to make it work in New Orleans on the personal level, and I think as a professional, he doesn't want to be seen as a bust in New Orleans. And if he leaves this way, that stain will follow him forever.
Yeah, that's perfectly summarized. That's 100%. I think sometimes when someone tells you what they think, you have to believe them. You know, he's saying, I want to be here. We know that he hates the spotlight. We don't see any of it. Every time he does venture out into it, he gets burned. So I can see for his, his own personal feelings, he's sitting there going, well, why would I give anything? Because the media's going to spin whatever I say. I can go out and smile and they say, oh, Zion was, standing next to a bus stop. Does that mean he's catching a Greyhound to Boston? You're like, what are you talking about? We get this carry on all the time. And for him as a young guy, I think that is also part that doesn't really get reminded. Is this guy's, 23, 24 years old? You're dragged into the spotlight at 18, 19 years old. There's a lot of growing up that you get along the way as well. And I think there comes the expectation when you're drafted at number one that, okay, you're the franchise savior, you're the guy. And unfortunately, that hasn't sort of panned out. It also hasn't been enabled by the front office at times in that, Brandon Ingram was available. Brandon Ingram was sort of the star. And then Zion was sort of the enigma. When he was playing, he was fantastic, but also we knew that he was going to be out for 30, 40, 50 games, or, there was sort of that expectation it was going to happen. Now you have a core of Zion, Trey Murphy, Herb, Jordan Poole. I like that acquisition. Thoughts on Jordan Poole as someone that is a bit of a different type to CJ, a little bit more sort of herky-jerky, scorer, electric, younger. What did you think of that acquisition?
I think, the positives for it are, you get a guy who's a really explosive scorer. And you need that. You need a third explosive option. You also have a guy who's versatile enough to understand on some teams he's better as a sixth man, and on some teams he's functional as a starter. I think, like you said, you get younger, though. Jordan Poole is probably older than people think he is. Yeah. He's 26. He's not 23. Yeah. So he's a little older than I think people, for remembering, I think he's going into year 7 as well. So when you look at that, I think you're getting a lot for him. I think there's a lot that you are adding to this team. He's suited to play in the up tempo where you want this team to be. This should be one of the fastest teams in the league. You have guys who are basically greyhounds on the basketball court right now who need to run, and he is certainly capable of doing that. He gives you a little more size than CJ does at a 6'4", 6'5", rather than that 6'3" that CJ puts on the floor. A little more athleticism. You can in transition, he can be a guy who finishes at the rim a little bit better than CJ does, though he didn't do a lot of that in Washington, and I think there are reasons for that. The questions are, just like with a lot of these guys on the Pelicans who have never experienced any meaningful winning as starters, for Jordan Poole, who has, and for Kevon Looney, who has experienced winning, you're relying on that. But for the last 2 years, Jordan Poole hasn't played for anything. And so you want to make sure you break any bad habits that losing does create. And it just does. Losing creates bad habits because he knew he wasn't playing 40 minutes a night. So you get up all your shots in 20. You know what I mean? So you do those things, and he got his points, and he certainly played well. But he's now got to get back to those things that he learned in Golden State, moving without the basketball, being someone who cuts and moves when you don't have the shot, who moves the ball quickly. It can't stick. That's been a big problem. And then he's got to play a little bit better defensively. You can't be a sieve for a Pelicans team that struggles on the perimeter defensively in general. So if he can do those things, I think absolutely he is a positive addition. The minimum, though, is you're just hoping that he matches what CJ gave you on a nightly basis. Can you give me 20 points and a consistent outside shot? If you give me more than that, great, but don't give me less. And I think that's the test for Jordan Poole, is to be night in and night out a guy that you can count on for those 20 points without fail, and to shoot 8, 9 3-pointers every night without fail. I think he'll do those things. Can the Pelicans offense match what he wants to do?
Yeah, it's a good take. The not playing for something, you can. You're just getting the doldrums right. I know I'm playing 3 quarters and then I'm sitting down. The priority at that Washington team was to play these young guys and play them as much as possible. Bit of a shift here where we're going to have to be on from day dot in this season. The schedule has not been kind. I've done a show where we looked at each of the sort of starting games and dug into those. And while there's injuries and there's always asterisks in all these games, if you aren't ready to go day one and you have to take a bit of time to adjust and start slow, you're looking at the rest of the ladder, running miles ahead. You're already left behind. And what you don't want to have is a 1-14 start or whatever we've had before, where there's not that opportunity this year to come back. There's too many good teams that they'll go. They'll win their games they're meant to win, and that'll be it. Do you think, there's always going to be a learning curve when you bring these players in. What do they need to focus on to start this season, to just be consistently competitive? What are the key things that you think the Pelicans have to do?
I think first and foremost, they have to be fast. And that's been such a big problem for Willie Green in keeping this team moving, either passing the ball quickly, moving without the ball quickly, getting shots up early in offense. You have to push, make or miss. Make or miss, you've got to be a team that runs. Be more like the Indiana Pacers, quite frankly. Because I don't think the Pacers are a team that has a ton of great shooters. You know what I mean? You don't think of them as a team that has a ton, but they play fast constantly. They run off makes. They run off misses. They're going to make you play the way they play. And the Pelicans, I think one of the biggest problems you probably have in just watching them is you get frustrated because they don't impose their will on teams. They don't make them play the way they want to play. On some nights they do, but it's not something that you would say is a characteristic of the New Orleans Pelicans. Yeah. I think when you look at teams like the Boston Celtics, when you look at teams like Oklahoma City Thunder, the Indiana Pacers, they make you play the way that they want to play no matter what. Every night you're going to have to play. Now you might beat them at it. They may not make their shots. They may not be able to. They may not have it that night. But you're going to have to beat them that way. And I think the Pelicans have to become that kind of team. One of the things I said in the podcast that I did about Joe Dumars is that toughness is not just about what you can take. It's not about what you can endure. In sports, it's also about what can you inflict on the other team. Can you make them deal with what you're bringing? And, Willie talks about defensively making him, you got to make them feel you on offense. You have to, and the NBA is that league now. Defense is incredibly important still. I think people undervalue the ability to play defense. Oklahoma City was the best defensive team in the league last year, and they did what they needed to do to make their offense work. Their defense created that tempo. And I think the Pelicans, they are not going to be great defensively, so they have to be great offensively. They have to run every night. They cannot play in the half court because they just don't have enough guys who are going to be great in one-on-one creating situations. You just don't have enough guys with the kind of experience that it takes to play in the half court who aren't going to turn the basketball over. So you have to maximize your opportunities by getting more possessions, not fewer.
And I think we've seen the best version of this Pelicans is when they run, when they get out and they cause havoc defensively and then go and then, play at a pace that isn't, stagnant. At times, I was always critical of CJ for this at times, is that we'd get on a good run and then he would sort of get the ball and he'd just walk it up. And all of a sudden you're playing with, 16 seconds on the shot clock and you're like, all that momentum that you've just built, you've just let them off the hook. Because, we're a little bit gassed, but now they're getting a chance to rest. And the defense is now set, and they're going, well, all right, we've just got to withstand this. We've got 30 seconds before, we have to do anything. And I think we have to play transition basketball, and making teams play our game is it's exactly right. Boston, they come in, we know exactly what they want to do every night. And they're like, all right, well, this is the game of basketball that we're going to play. We're going to shoot threes, and we're going to shoot a lot of threes, and we're going to shoot more threes, and we're going to defend really hard, and then we're going to shoot more threes. And if you can't do it, you can't match us, you're going to lose. And
you look at a team like the Clippers, who doesn't run, they don't run, but they play the same every night. They're going to manhandle you physically.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? They're going to execute in the half court, and Ty Lue is a strategist. So he's looking for you to make the mistakes. And he's got guys like James Harden, like Kawhi Leonard, who are so great at the subtle parts of basketball that the half court is the best for them. You know what I mean? Like, and that's their identity. And every night they'd rather play it at 105. The Pelicans need to be one of those teams that's at 115, and you've got to be top 5 in steals. You've got to be great on the defensive glass, and you just got to run that basketball. You got to push it ahead.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I mean, that Clippers team, then you go and add Chris Paul, so he's pretty average in the half court as well, as you can imagine. Yeah. Oh, gosh. That team, I think, is going to be okay, depending on, Father Time and injuries.
They're so old. Yeah, I mean, like, that may be the oldest team we've ever seen. Like, you think about it, just for a team that's a legitimate title contender where everybody in their core is over 30, except for, I guess, Zubac is the only player in their main rotation who's not 30. John Collins is 30 almost right now. You know what I mean? Like, you added a bunch of guys. Brook Lopez is well over 30. Like, that whole team is experienced. But you got a lot of deep playoff runs. But can any of them play 70 games besides Harden?
Yeah, well, and even we've seen his hamstrings, come and go as they please. The only other team I can think is maybe like that Brooklyn Nets team that went and got Kevin Garnett and Paul Pierce, and they were all with Darren Williams. Brook Lopez was there as the young guy then.
Squad.
That was, Jason Terry at 38 or something. That was
an old team.
Yeah, and a lot of draft picks. And now
the young Brook Lopez.
Yeah. He's still there. It's joining the squad, shoes on the other foot now. This Western Conference, I mean, speaking of the Clippers, this Western Conference, I've said it before, if you aren't competing, you're going to get left behind straight away, and then it becomes a lost season. I don't think we can afford another lost season. Don't have a draft pick, traded that for Derek Queen. And unless you're going to start selling people off as sort of spare parts to get more assets in, well, we're in a little bit of strife unless we compete. Is it realistic that we can be competitive in this Western Conference? There's a lot of teams that are pushing up from below us. What are your thoughts on that?
I think the Western Conference is probably 13 teams deep, legitimately, depending on how health works out. I think the only team that you're for sure counting out today is Utah. And I think Phoenix is very wobbly. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have a lot of hopes for Phoenix. But outside of that, you saw Portland is pretty good. You know what I mean? Like, Dallas should be good. San Antonio should be good. All these places, you look around and you say, unless people get hurt, they should all be relatively good. And I think when you get from 5 to 13, 6 to 13 in the West, there's not a lot of difference. It's going to be who shows up most nights. Which team has their best players available to them, which team, as you said, wins the games they're supposed to, and then steals a couple that you aren't supposed to win. And, I think that's where the Pelicans find themselves, in that great middle of not being elite. They are an elite team. Let's not lie to ourselves and think that they are. But they have a chance. If everything goes right, could they make a second-round run in the Western Conference? Sure, because it's about matchups in that first round. If you get we saw last year in the playoffs, a lot of lower-seeded teams won playoff series because it was the matchup that was right for them, or they had the right health at the right time. So I think, if the Pelicans get 60-plus games out of Zion, Trey, Herb, Jordan Poole, Kevon Looney all together, if you get that 5 all together for 60-plus games, then this is a team that probably finds itself somewhere between 6 to 10, playing for a play-in spot. And if that's the case, coming off a 21-win season, like there's, historically, let's be real, coming off a 21-win season, and you didn't add an all-star to your roster, you're hoping for health, but your roster is essentially the same. Then I think if you got to 43 wins this year, that's a 22-win improvement, which is about where the Memphis Grizzlies were last year in their improvement from one year to the next. I think there was a 22-game improvement. Then I think that's where the Pelicans should probably end up, in 6 to 10, fighting for a play-in spot. And Joe Dumars is clearly counting on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's fair. And like you said, you don't add an all-star. You haven't really done too much in terms of shaping the roster beyond. You've switched out a small sort of shooting guard for a slightly taller shooting guard. You've gone and got Kevon Looney, he's only about 6'9" or 6'10", isn't he? Like he's not a huge man. I mean, comparatively, but
the two of us, he's much bigger.
Yeah. I mean, you bring in this leadership, you bring in these sort of winners, but you still got to make it all work on the court, right? And like you said, matchups are so important. It's going to be about consistently winning, and then when you do go on that inevitable losing streak, which is going to happen, is not letting it become 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We've seen, games. You have to really cut it off at, hang on, what are we doing here? We've lost a couple on the trot. Let's reset. And I think who's responsible for that? The players have got to be accountable, but does it come to coaches as well in that situation?
Yeah, I think you have to look at coaching because the best teams don't lose 3 in a row.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it stops right there. You can lose back-to-back. It happens. The NBA is a tough place. But really good teams don't lose 3 in a row. And good teams win, they go on winning streaks. Mm-hmm. And we've not seen that for the Pelicans over the past 4 years. Again, I point this number out. In 4 years, they've only had 3 winning streaks of 5 games or more. In 4 years. That's insane. And when you look at the losses, I think that's the part that I put on coaching, because the variation in the losses, the fact that the Pelicans can go from beating an elite team to the next night losing by 50 at home and those types of things, that can't happen. And that's on the coach to keep you steady. Remember, you always hear about not getting too high with wins and not too low with losses. How does this happen to the Pelicans consistently? And I think you have to look at the coaching when those types of things happen. When you can't win on the road, that's a coaching issue. You're not when you struggle in late game situations, that's a coaching issue. When you don't have guys knowing what to do situationally, when it looks like they're confused, and you see that operationally with the Pelicans plenty of times. Who's supposed to get the ball right now? What are we supposed to be doing? You see that. You see defensively. Are we supposed to be switching right now? Those types of things, they should all be second nature for good teams. You know exactly what you're doing in the clutch when you're a good team because you do the same thing every night. You run the same sets. You're comfortable in them. And the players change. But players change every year. The average team probably changes 4 to 5 players every year on its roster. So why are other teams capable of doing things that the Pelicans can't? That doesn't mean that they have bad coaches, per se. What it means is they don't have effective coaching. It's not reaching the people. And as somebody who works in communication and has for 30 years now, the biggest thing you understand is that the failure in communication is on both sides.
Yeah.
Whenever you have a breakdown of communication, it's on both sides. As a communicator, you failed in sending your message, and the audience failed in receiving it in some way. They came to hear it. If your audience shows up, they came to hear your message. But if you failed, they failed too. And it's your job, I think, as the coach, as the person who gives it, is to figure out how each side is failing. Why are the players not hearing me? Because if you say we're going to be 0.5, and we've heard that from year one, right? The coaching staff, we're going to get the ball moving in 0.5 seconds, and you've never seen it. Why are the players not doing it?
Yeah, why not?
Is it open disrespect? I don't think that's the case because it's happened with every team, no matter who the mix has been. So I don't think it's open defiance. I think something is failing there in the way that both sides are communicating. And ultimately, the responsibility goes on the leadership, and that's the coach.
Yeah, perfect segue into Willie Green. He has been here, 5 years now, I think?
4 seasons.
4 seasons,
This is season 5.
Season 5. If you look at wins and losses, we've improved every year besides last year, which was just awful. Health aside. But the losing seems to be different every time. We get flogged. We lose late game situations, like you said. That what was a 49-win season, and we lost something like 22 games by in the last quarter, and it was just like, why is this happening when you can go and absolutely annihilate some of these amazing teams that you're not meant to beat? He has to be on the hottest seat in the NBA. I think you're at the end of your contract. You're coming up as a coaching free agent. New regime come in at the top. What does Willie Green need to do to save his seat?
Playoff series. He's gonna have to win a playoff series. Because I mean, let's look at the NBA. I mean, the coaches who win quickly. Like by and large, the coaches who win quickly. How long has Daggino been in Oklahoma City? Not that long.
Not long, no.
You know what I mean? Like in the past 20 seasons, there's only been 2 coaches who won their championship after their 5th year at the franchise. After. And won their first title.
Yeah.
And that's, Pat Riley with the Heat. That took him a long time to win that first title with the Heat. And then the other is, I want to say it's Greg Popovich. It took him more than 5 years to win his first. Well, no, not his first. Who am I thinking of? I can't remember the other, but it's only 2 in the last 20 years. You look at everybody else; it's usually by year 4. Budenholzer, there you go. Budenholzer was the other one. So those are the only 2 that took more than 5 years with their team to win a title. We're going into year 5. The Pelicans are not winning a title this year. There's just no way. I mean,
no.
Come on, the best case scenario, no Pelicans fan is picking their team to win the title. You could hope it, but you're not betting those odds. So, I mean, if you look at it like that, and you look at, again, you break down the individual things. Like you said, you look at the wins, losses, fine. But what do you know about the Pelicans over the last 4 years? And even if you take out year 3, going into last year, Willie Green had a losing record against the Eastern Conference. The Eastern Conference.
Yeah, how do you?
Going into last year, Willie Green had a losing record at home. At home.
Yeah.
In 3 years. So those 2 things right there, you're not great against the lesser of 2 conferences, which you should be beating. And you've gotten swept by teams like Orlando when they weren't good. You've gotten swept by the Bulls when they weren't good. You've gotten beaten by the Nets, who had abandoned winning. All these teams that have beaten you in these games. You lost to the Hornets when they weren't trying to win games.
Yeah.
All those losses. And then, like you said, the lack of winning in clutch time. You went to the playoffs against Oklahoma City and put up the worst offensive playoff series that people have seen in the last 20 years. When you got to the playoffs against the Suns the previous time, you only got there by the skin of your teeth with a 36-win team that again, got favorable matchups against a Clippers team that you've beaten consistently. Yeah. And you got to get past that one. And then you stole another win and got in. But you look at those failures, like at Oklahoma City in the play-in the year after that, the 42-40 season, where you couldn't stop Oklahoma City in the fourth quarter on your home court, and you let them drive to the bucket over and over again. You leave Jonas Valanciunas sitting on the bench, not taking a shot while your team, not getting a rebound for you either when you couldn't get a defensive rebound. Those types of things. That, to me, says, again, it's not about the quality of the person and the quality that you may like about them. I will never doubt that Willie Green cares about his job, that he comes to do the work every day. I will never say that he doesn't. But the results and the fit sometimes don't go together anymore. And I think when you look at this and you look at would any team in the league take Willie Green ahead of the coach that they have right now? And I think you put Willie in that great abyss of okay coaches like a Vinny Del Negro, like a Scott Brooks, like who are fine people, but they're not difference makers. They're not difference makers. And when you look at the great coaches of all time, and this is something I think about a lot, I don't put any of the great coaches as somebody who could, like in the NFL, when you have a great coach in the National Football League, the great coaches are innovators in some way, offensively or defensively. In the NBA, that's not the case. The best coaches in the NBA are great managers of men. The thing you know about Phil Jackson, he's associated with the triangle. The triangle was a means to an end of his philosophy of sharing the ball and everybody being part of the team. It wasn't about the triangle itself. It's about the philosophy. Pat Riley played fast with the Lakers and had Showtime, and then with the Heat, he's physical and beating you up every night. And same with the Knicks. He did what he had to do with the talent. Same guy. Didn't change. Steve Kerr. Do you think of Steve Kerr as a genius?
No.
Greg Popovich. Do you think of him as a genius? but they are great at administering, hiring the right people, making sure there's accountability within the organization, having a great relationship with the superstars is important. And all of those guys did that. And I don't think Willie Green has those same characteristics. Some people are great assistants, and some people are great head coaches. And it feels like Willie Green is a guy like a Dennis Allen or whomever other kind of coaches you think about, guys who are just better suited to support rather than to lead.
Yeah, I think that's perfect, and the thing about that is it's not even a knock on him, right? It's just a personality type. It's a where do your skills lie? And I think, as when we recruited Willie Green, he was talked up as this great, connector and communicator and leader of players, and that's fine. And you can do that as a development coach, as an assistant, getting buy-in from players. That's fantastic. But when the rubber hits the road, you're making the decisions, and you also need to know when that decision is better made by someone else. So you've got, James Borrego sitting there, whose offense we haven't seen despite him sitting there for 2 years. You've got to know what you're good at. And all great leaders know that I'm really good at this, and so I'll excel at that. But I also will put my people in a position to be successful. And if you can't do that, or you don't recognise when is the time to do that and when to take the reins back, you're going to have a disconnect. And I think that's where we're at, where he's now overcorrected to the point where, well, I have to fix it because I've got it wrong. And all that does is ruin the skills that you did have, which was the connection, the ability to get buy-in and things like that, and try to force in this, well, we're going to move fast and, give them credit and do things like that. And then you just make yourself seem incompetent, which is not a true testament, because you're not bad at what you do, because you've got to this position. You were rewarded with the position as head coach of the Pelicans for a reason. The execution from there on is where that disconnect has happened. And I think for him, I think he'd be a fantastic 2IC in some of those teams that are a little bit, what's the right word? Strategic led. So you've got a really strategic coach. You put a guy like Willie Green in there to just, come on guys, let's get it together. This is what we need to execute. Let's be better, and achieve that buy-in. And I think that's where he's best suited. And that's okay. There's plenty of great career assistants who've made a lot of money and won a lot of championships. But I think we need to pivot. And, he's going to get through, way too long into this season. I think before you can do anything about it, we'll end up with Borrego as an interim. And then it's going to sort of be like, well, do you just promote Borrego to head coach? What's your thoughts on that? Is he the ready-made step in, or do you just go and you've got to open it up, right, and find someone else?
It's so hard, for in-season replacements. And that's, I think, the struggle that a lot of Pelicans fans are going to have this season is, on the one hand, there is a general, I'm not going to say overwhelming because I don't know the numbers, but I'll say there's a general consensus amongst fans that they'd like to move on from Willie, right? Let's just assume that's the case.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you want the Pelicans, and they have to, for the reasons we've talked about with the lack of a draft pick and the things that Joe Dumars has done. You got to win this season.
Yeah.
So, if the Pelicans get off to a bad start and Willie Green gets fired, because of the way that the Western Conference is, you can't fall behind too far. You can't wait till they're 5-15 and then change the coach, if that's what the case is. But if you do change the coach, history also says, unless you have a really good team like the ones we saw last year that replaced their coaches during the season, but that was already when those teams basically had their playoff spots locked up when they changed their coaches, it probably isn't going to make you better during the season. I think the Pelicans could be different because of if Borrego were to take over, and as it means nothing, Borrego is 2-0 when he's coached the Pelicans over the last couple of years. He's had one game each season. But I think there would be a difference as far as the way the team looks and plays. Yeah. And I think if you are going to make a change, that's exactly what you're looking for, is a stylistic change and a communications change, all of those things. And I think Borrego could do that. But I also agree with you that there's no one who should have the job outright. that if you go through the season and even Borrego does a great job, he should still have to earn it in an interview with his plan. And I need to know what's going, because adapting to a bad circumstance, again, doesn't necessarily mean you're the right guy to be my head coach long term. I need to know if you align with my vision as Joe Dumars, and I need to know if I'm Borrego, there are conditions that I want. That I want to make sure that going forward, hey, which players am I going to have? Hey, when in free agency, how much input? Borrego's already been a head coach and knows what it's like to have to wait. So if you're going to take your next job, knowing as a head coach, that could be your last chance. You may not get a third chance of being a head coach. There are going to be some things that he wants, and those need to be discussed as well. So yeah, I think that the Pelicans are in a very weird position of wanting their primary coach to succeed, but having someone waiting in the wings who certainly didn't come back to not be in position to be the head coach when he did have some opportunities to leave the Pelicans, and the Pelicans made sure that Borrego couldn't go to the New York Knicks, which he would have done if they had given him that opportunity. So you brought him back. Yeah, he's waiting there. You got to hope that Willie Green ignores James Borrego's presence as far as being the successor in waiting, but embraces James Borrego's philosophies in order to get results for himself. Willie Green has to be selfish in that manner and use and exploit the talents of James Borrego offensively to save himself. If not, there will be a new head coach. And I think that there will be – people say it's not an attractive job. If you pay people, it's an attractive job. And that's going to be the big thing is whomever the next coach is, the Pelicans can't go for another unknown. They need to find somebody who has some gravitas who can come in and redirect the franchise.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's not like they're getting paid, $25,000 to come out and coach on the weekends. No, you get paid good money. I think, how many NBA head jobs are there? 30? There's a lot of assistants and there's a lot of guys coming through every year that want to be a head coach. It's a pretty competitive job. I think if the Pelicans put it up on, one of the job boards and said, hey, come be the head coach, you're going to have a few applications, I'd say. I mean, probably a few from Twitter as well, but, because we all know better, that's for sure. I know.
Take a front office job. I don't want to coach, but if somebody wants to put...
Yeah, I reckon that would be all right. Especially when one of the players puts lunch on and things like that. That's great. Not for me. I won't have to bring my lunch. That'd be perfect. But
right.
David, before we let you go, the last question I wanted to ask is what, if you could look into your crystal ball, what does this season look like? And of course, there's all the disclaimers that go with that because who knows. But if looking at what we've got at the moment, how does this team end up?
I don't want to give a definitive number because, like you said, there's so many variables. But I think this team is somewhere between 36 and 43 wins. I think that's where they are. And you have to just look at historical precedent as far as teams rebounding from one year to the next, what kind of single season rebounds you can expect. I think that this team can be potentially a top 10 offense in this league, if not higher, if everything is going well. I think they will struggle defensively again. I think that's a problem for them, particularly on the perimeter at the point of attack. Outside of Herb Jones, you don't have a single legitimate perimeter defender. Trey is getting better, and I think Zion is getting better, but I don't think you'd call either one of them a stopper as of yet. And I think, so you worry about those things. Interior wise, that's I think the biggest concern is where you really have to be paying attention to this team, because with Derek Queen's wrist injury, how long will he be out? You don't have, as you said, a lot of guys over 6'10" on this roster. I think you got three guys 6'10" and taller on this team, in Carlo, Eve, and if we're counting Trey at 6'10".
Yeah, Kevon Looney standing on a step,
because Looney is 6'9", so and that's his official height is listed as 6'9" and all the stuff. So you don't really in a league where, and it's particularly in a Western Conference where everybody got bigger.
Yeah,
everybody has at least two centers, and the Pelicans are hoping they have 1.5. I think if you combine Eve and Kevon, they are one really good defensive center potentially. The Carlo has to make a big step up, but I think there will be teams. The Pelicans starting five is a legitimate starting five. but that bench is a worry.
Yeah.
You've got 2 rookies. You got Jordan Hawkins, who just has not been who you've asked him to be over the first 2 seasons. You don't know what you're getting out of Sadiq Bey. You don't know what you're going to get out of some of these other guys who are on the bench. Jose Alvarado only plays about 50 games a year himself.
Yeah.
So those are things that you're concerned about with his injury status. Is Jeremiah Fears even going to get on the court this season? I don't know. So I think that bench is such a major concern. Willie being the concern too. And the Western Conference being what it is, I think between 36 and 43, which would be between a 15 and 22 win improvement. I think that's a fair way to be. And if the Pelicans are in the play-in, they've got to get out of there and into the playoffs. And Willie Green for Willie Green, he's got to win a series. But the Pelicans cannot miss the playoffs. They cannot because of that pig. They cannot miss the playoffs this season. So I think that'll be the case. If they do make a trade, the last thing I would say is if you do make a trade, if Joe Dumars does, and I have to move somebody on his team, I'm doing it for picks, not players.
Yeah, agree.
I'm doing it for picks, not players, because the salary situation, I want flexibility, and I want to get back into next year's draft in particular. Because I would tell folks, go look at how deep next year's draft is. If you can get back into it and you're the New Orleans Pelicans, and you miss the playoffs and those types, you need to get younger, and you need to start thinking about the future.
Yeah, I just nodded along. I was like, I think that's perfect. That's exactly what I think as well, and be decisive in that decision. I think at the moment we've got a foot in each camp with youth versus experience. At some point, you've got to make a decision. Are we good enough, or can we get good enough, or are we we're just going to have to start again? And that's both are fine options. I mean, as a fan, devastating if we have to start again, but that's the cycle of the NBA, right? That we have to, sometimes you have to tear down to build back up. David,
let me just say real quick, I just want to say real quick, like if you're, like you said on that choice, because you didn't draft Fears and Queen to not be pillars.
Yeah. Exactly.
And if you're going to do that, they need minutes, and they're not going to get minutes if you're still committed to Zion Williamson.
Yeah. No, I think, that's exactly right. Yeah, you've drafted, you've gone and got Derek Queen, right? You haven't gone and got him for no reason. Why did you trade back in and get him if he's just going to sit and become, some rotational big that comes on for 15 to 20 minutes a night? That's not why you went and got him. Same as Jeremiah Fears. So I suppose only time will tell. I guess it's a wait and see approach, and that's why they get paid the money they get paid.
But I want to see, don't you? I'm ready to see. I'm ready to see.
I'm chomping at the bit now for the basketball to start. David, I appreciate you taking the time. Where can we find you? What's happening? And then we'll give you your evening back.
You can check me out on the Post Up on YouTube on Boo Crew Media Mondays, Tuesdays, and Thursdays. You can also check thebirdrights.com for Pelicans coverage. You can also find me on heavy.com writing about the New Orleans Saints if you want to follow them and the NFL. And I may be doing some other things in the future. And if you like American college basketball, you can check out the Tulane Green Wave in the fall. I do color commentary for the Green Wave as well on ESPN+. So a lot of basketball coming in the fall. It's my favorite time of year, so I just can't wait.
Oh, well, there you go. If you're not seeing any of David Grubb, well, turn your TV on because he's around. He is around. David, I appreciate you taking the time. It's been absolutely excellent to catch up and chat Pels, and hopefully we can do this again sometime when we've got some basketball to talk about. Actual games.
I'll have to have you on my show after the Pels get to Australia in the preseason. I have to have you on, and we can talk about what you saw up close and personal. So let's do that. Yeah,
it sounds good. Yeah, I'll be down there with my binoculars down on the hill, taking me notes. So that sounds great. But guys, I think we've reached time. Shall we leave it at that? This has been Flock. I am your host, Lyle Swithenbank, with David Grubb. At Lyle Swithenbank on Twitter, YouTube, TikTok, all of the fun stuff that we have. Stay safe, and of course, bye for now.